Blue Blood Report Card. Tongue twister for me. That's the second time that I've messed that up on this show. A little patag flag there. We're going to break this down. These are coaches ending their second year of their tenure, going into year 3. And I thought this was interesting because this was there were no lack of big names, right, in that coaching cycle just 2 years ago. Drew, our grades for these guys, we're going to talk about 4 of them. You and I are going to break them down, but here's the criteria before we get into the grades a little bit. Grades are based on on-field performance, recruiting, player development, and the transfer portal, all right? So all that is baked into this cake. Before we start yelling about some guys who got better records than the other ones, Drew, this is kind of state of the program and then also kind of looking forward as well, 3 to 4 years into our microscope and kind of seeing what that looks like as well. So, Drew, let's start at the top. USC and Lincoln Riley, 18-8 in his first 2 seasons, 11-3 in 2022, 7-5 in 2023. They had the number 8 recruiting class in 2023, number 18 in 2024. I'm going to hit on this kind of throughout the show and especially in this segment. The thing that I kind of really look for, especially with these coaches going into year 3, such a critical year, is it an uptick or a downtick in terms of recruiting? What does that look like? And you look at USC, they come out hot, finish in the top 10 in the first year under Lincoln Riley. Year 2, they're number 18. Right? The other part about this is they have 21 players in the state of California in the top 247. Guess how many are committed to USC? 3 of them. Oregon has 4. Alabama has 3. You talk about the state of recruiting in California, and what does that look like? I think that leaves a lot to be desired. Alex Grinch is gone after 2 seasons at the helm. Lincoln Riley brought him over from Oklahoma. This is one of the worst defenses in all of college football. Drew, it's hard to get excited about USC when you have the Heisman Trophy winner going into year 2. There should be momentum behind your program, and you finish 7-5. I gave them a C+. You gave them a C. I think I'm rather generous. I think I am excited about what they've done at the skill position on the offensive side of the ball. 5-star Malachi Nelson is a guy that we like, but I wouldn't be surprised if they get into the portal this year. So we'll see what happens. My biggest thing with USC is such a lack of an identity at the line of scrimmage. It frustrates me. And then to not address that in your own state, that is one of the most talent-rich states in all of the country, is a little bit of a head-scratcher for me. And I talked about this a few weeks ago on the show when we talked about, all right, how does Lincoln Riley's program stack up against the likes of Oregon and Dan Lanning, who both are on their way to the Big Ten? Drew, they got beat up by, albeit a more competitive Pac-12 conference than we have seen in a long time this year, 7-5. If they're 7-5 in 2023, I have some major concerns about what they're going to look like in 2024. And I hate to say this, but this is a yin and yang type of hire. This defensive coordinator, his job's not only going to be to identify, acquire talent, player development, but I feel like you got to get a guy that's so much opposite of Lincoln Riley and what he wants USC to be, which let's just call it what it is. USC's a 7-on-7 team with no point of attack capability whatsoever right now. They got to change their identity going into the Big Ten, or it's going to be a rough outlook for the next couple of years. They're capable of doing it. Will they get it done? I don't know. I expect Lincoln Riley to be the young, cool, hip coach that can look in the mirror and evolve and adapt on the fly and say, hey, that's wrong. We can fix that going into next year. He has not done it. He's looked like one of those old stubborn dudes that's just been the same guy and then says, you know what, we're going to do it my way. So USC, right, for me, Drew, I give him a C+. That's probably a little better grade than what I just sounded like by explaining it, but that's kind of where I stand on him.
Well, I give him a C as well, and I think that's really because of the offensive personnel that they've brought in. But you hit on a variety of different things. I mean, how are they getting better in the trenches on both sides of the ball, and more specifically so on defense? I think you can only add so much via the transfer portal. And then, Coop, I know you hear the rumors out there of guys that are potentially entering or are going to enter, and the tampering that's going on. I have yet to hear a premium pass rusher linked to USC. I hear them linked to some of the other schools that they consistently compete for recruits with. You mentioned how many guys in the top 247 from the state of California they have committed. I think the more alarming stat is none of the top 5 guys from the state are headed to USC. You have Aiden Breland headed to Oregon. You have Xavier Brown headed to Alabama, the cornerback. Julian Sayin, the quarterback, headed to Tuscaloosa as well. I just wonder, how are they going to get better in the trenches? Sitting 18 in the class, we love Jason Zamandela, one of our top-ranked interior offensive linemen. We like Cameron Fountain, the pass rusher out of the Atlanta area, but those guys aren't year 1, year 2 contributors. So for me, I'm not worried about the offensive perimeter talent. I'm not worried about the quarterback position, but I have major questions as they prepare for life in the Big Ten, where you're going to be facing these teams in some cold weather that want to run the football. So that's why I have a C. We'll see what happens with the defensive coordinator hire, and then we're going to see what they're going to do in the transfer portal. But I think from a high school recruiting class standpoint, you look at this group, and it's a bit underwhelming for what USC should be doing, especially in the NIL era.
Big offseason for Lincoln Riley ahead. Like you said, the transfer portal is on Monday, December 4th, and USC still doesn't have a defensive coordinator yet. I would hope that decision would be done this week. We'll see what happens there. Lincoln Riley going into year 3, 18-8. It's not the record, but it's almost how you got there, right? 11 wins in the first season, 7 wins with Caleb Williams in the second. Leaves a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth. All right, let's go to the next one. Marcus Freeman, Drew, at Notre Dame, also 18-8, 9-4 in his first season in 2022, 9-3 with the chance to get to 10 wins in 2023. The 2023 ranked recruiting class, number 12 for the Irish, number 8 in 2024, right? So we talked about that uptick a little bit. It might be incremental, but believe it or not, Drew, 12-8, that's a big jump, right? And I think we talked about that. Marcus Freeman last year, they had some big misses, right? They were in it for guys like Dante Moore. You kind of go down the list as well. Keon Keeley, another name, and a handful more. Peyton Bowen, that Marcus Freeman swung and missed on. Drew, I'm fine with that. As long as you're in the batter's box, taking hacks and putting everything you got going forward, I'm okay with that. And I think Marcus Freeman has done that. I think they've gotten incrementally better year over year. I think there are a lot of high expectations, college football playoff aspirations going into 2023 on the field. Drew, I really like the job that Marcus Freeman has done on the recruiting trail. I think he is getting the most out of Notre Dame there. And I think this is a team and a program that can compete sustainably for top 10 classes under Marcus Freeman. Drew, the other thing that I like is what they've done at the quarterback position. I think Marcus Freeman, you got to give a lot of credit to, right? Kenny Minchie last year, they flip him late from Pittsburgh, guy that we like in the top 247 out of Tennessee. You get C.J. Carr in 2024, a signal caller we're really excited about. You bring Sam Hartman over from Wake Forest as a grad transfer, and now there are those rumors out there, Riley Leonard might be suiting up for the Golden Domers, right, coming over from Duke. So he's been aggressive. Maybe there's some things that they need to tweak, but I like what they've done under Al Golden defensively as well. This is a team that is now in a roster that is starting to kind of fit the identity and personality of their head coach. So there have been some hiccups along the way. I think I will call them growing pains. The loss against Marshall last year, I think a disappointing loss against a down Clemson team this year, even though they're playing well as of late. Drew, I gave Marcus Freeman a B+, and I think the future is really bright for Notre Dame under his guidance.
Yeah, I gave them a B+ as well, and I know that graphic showed the past few recruiting classes. Also in the 2025 cycle, they're sitting number 5 right now, and Notre Dame normally starts off hot, but talking with Tom Loy, who does an excellent job of covering the Irish, he thinks they're going to pick up a big commitment later this week, so they're going to be even higher. Cooper, you hit it right on the head. I had written down quarterback, and that's why I gave Marcus Freeman a B+. They have figured that position out, and it is a super important position. On top of that, I think they are doing a good job of locking up guys that they need to lock up. Look at this 2024 recruiting class. Bryce Young, pass rusher out of North Carolina, just moved into the top 100 for us, All-American Bowl invitee. We're going to see him out in San Antonio. I mean, his dad is in the NFL Hall of Fame. That is a Notre Dame kid. You have to get that across the finish line. They do just that. Kingston Viamu, Asa, another guy from California. You're kind of wondering, hey, why is the USC not involved here? Well, Notre Dame takes advantage, and I think he fits the culture, what they want to do in South Bend. Other guys I like in that class, Keendron Young, the running back, our number 3 running back right now in the 2024 cycle. We've seen what Audric Estime has been able to do there this season in the gold pants and the gold helmet. I think Keendron Young is a guy that is similar in a lot of different ways. I mean, he's a big, powerful runner that's creative at the second level. They're adding Cam Williams, a wide receiver out of the Chicagoland area. I get excited about him and what he could be. So I like what Marcus Freeman and the Irish have done. I think you're excellent. We'll see if they can get a Keon Keeley in the boat, but I think just realizing what they are and winning some of these big battles early in the process is starting to pay off. And then putting a bow on this, I mean, the quarterback position, you didn't even mention Deuce Knight in the 2025 cycle. He is an absolute wild card. So love the future outlook of that room as well.
They've upgraded the speed and athleticism profile of that team since Marcus Freeman has been there. I think that's the one difference between him and Brian Kelly and what he's done. It's been incremental, but I think he is trending in the right direction. So Notre Dame gets a B+ from both Andrew and I for Marcus Freeman going into year 3. I think you got to be excited about the future of Notre Dame football. All right, Drew, Billy Napier, the Florida Gators, right? 11-14. The two other guys we talked about, 18-8. This one, the other side of the spectrum, Florida, it's been a rocky road. 6-7 in their first year under Billy Napier, 5-7 this year. They will miss out on a postseason bowl bid, number 13 in 2023 in terms of recruiting, number 5 in 2024. And right now, that seems to be the goodwill that is really kind of pushing Billy Napier forward. Drew, for me, I gave Florida and Billy Napier a C. I think you and I both agree that we are huge fans in what Billy Napier has done off the field in terms of talent ID, talent identification, evaluation, building that team, upgrading that roster. I think he's done a really good job. But in terms of the on-field results, that's left a lot to be desired. And I look at a team in Florida that has so much potential in what they can be. And then you find out, I think it was this morning or maybe yesterday, Corey Raymond, defensive back coach, who's done a terrific job, I'll say it, bringing in talent at Florida since he's been there, and a couple young guys playing early for him already. Jordan Castell is a name that we've talked about. Corey Raymond, he's out. Defensive line coach, also out. So Florida in the midst of some major moves. We'll see what happens. Austin Armstrong, young defense coordinator, going into year 2. This is it for Billy Napier, Drew. And you know what? Like I said, you can do all the right things off the field, but if you can't get these guys developed and up to a competitive standpoint where I think games like Florida State were winnable. I think there are other games this season that were winnable for Florida that they didn't come out with the result or the desired result that they have. I don't know, Drew. I feel really good about CEO Billy Napier and his vision for the program off the field. In terms of the execution on the field, I have serious doubts if this is the guy that can get the job done, because what I've seen so far has not been the case, and there really hasn't been anything there that makes me feel confident going forward.
I think the big question for me with Florida is what are they going to do in the transfer portal starting next week, right? Graham Mertz was obviously a hit for Napier. I think he exceeded expectations for pretty much everyone outside of the individuals inside that locker room. But you look at the rest of the transfers they took and that class of 2023, I mean, it's not a bunch of guys that made a huge impact. And Billy Napier has been trying to build this the right way from the ground up. I mean, it is a complete rebuild. You talk about that 2023 recruiting class, Cooper. On Saturday night, I looked up. Florida, in the fourth quarter, had 4 freshman defensive backs on the field trying to guard Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson. And I know Florida State was playing a backup quarterback, but still, I mean, the youth movement is here. So my question is, how does Florida attack this? Do they go for some of these huge free agents that are on the market, or do they continue to lean into the youth and developing through the high school ranks? We know what Florida has committed in 2024. We like this class a lot. So I'm just fascinated to see, are the boosters going to pressure them into maybe getting aggressive and chasing after some of these other guys, or is Billy Napier going to maintain his process? And I'm really interested to see how that plays out. For me, I gave Billy a B-, and I know on the field it hasn't looked pretty, but I do like what they're doing on the recruiting front. I think he also needs some recognition for finding a quarterback of the future in DJ Lagway, right? Number 3 quarterback for us right now. We'll see what happens coming out of these all-star games. I think there's a chance, he could finish number 2, maybe even number 1 overall, DJ Lagway. He is the X factor, having a heck of a senior season there. And then we saw a little bit of Max Brown on Saturday night against the Seminoles. I'm still kind of buying some stock in him. I know he threw a late interception, but I think there's something there. So I like what they're doing in the high school recruiting, transfer portal, on field. That's why I've knocked this down a little bit, but I do think it's notable, DJ Lagway, and how they've kind of rebuilt that defensive line as well.
Critical year for Billy Napier going into year 3. Drew, this kind of feels like the leash is super tight here in Gainesville, and if it gets off to a rough start next year, I wouldn't be surprised if something happens earlier in the season, mid-season. We'll see a lot of expectations in Gainesville and Florida, rightfully so. All right, Drew, the last one here, Brent Venables, Oklahoma. Both you and I give Mr. Venables an A. After a 6-7 season in 2022, the Sooners 10-2 in 2023. Drew, they have to be the least talked about team on the recruiting trail that I think you and I don't want to say really like, I'll use the L word. I kind of love what they're doing, especially at the point of attack and on the defensive side of the ball. I love the fact that they were able to rattle off 10 wins this year, potentially get to 11. Drew, number 5 in 2023, number 7 in 2024. I talked about that uptick, but I think 5 to 7, you're in the same neighborhood there. There's a little bit of a difference, right? But I love what Oklahoma has done on the recruiting trail. That gets me really fired up. Biggest question mark going forward, you just lost your offensive coordinator, Jeff Lebby, to Mississippi State. He'll be the head coach there for the Bulldogs. We'll see what Brent Venables does and replaces him. But I think, Drew, if you were an Oklahoma fan when you hired Brent Venables and you were wondering, coming off a 6-7 season, all right, like, what does this look like for us? This was the ideal scenario, right? Outside of losing Jeff Lebby, you had the year that you had with Dylan Gabriel, Jackson Arnold still able to get a lot of run, and then you have your quarterback of the future beyond this year going into 2024. You feel really good about that, and I think the defensive uptick, at least from a talent acquisition standpoint, gets me really excited. Well, this is a team that I don't think will have any trouble acclimating to the SEC in 2024.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I gave them an A, and it's really because you go back to the 2023 cycle and you look at the headliners of that class. These guys are the core of the team moving forward. PJ Adebawore, Jackson Arnold, Peyton Bowen. Caden Green played 568 snaps as a true freshman during the regular season. Bowen was 302. Adebawore 176. Like, that is the core group for Oklahoma moving forward. You got their feet wet as freshmen. Those guys are going to be the ones with the impact stars under them moving forward. And then you look at this year's group. David Stone seems like he could be a day one guy. We're talking about the 5-star defensive lineman out of IMG Academy. His teammate, Jaden Jackson, I feel like he's a program guy. And then I think where Oklahoma doesn't get enough credit is how they've recruited on that offensive line. Malik Autry, someone they have committed this year, hopefully going to sign him, a kid out of Mississippi. They also got Eugene Brooks out of California. The PAI score for tracking football, it's off the charts. So I really like this group. I think they have the right identity, and they're going to be just as involved as everyone else in the transfer portal. But so far, so good. I think the one long-term outlook kind of question is, all right, what's the plan at quarterback post Jackson Arnold? If you kind of look at what they have committed now, not only in the 2024 cycle, but also that 2025 cycle. It's still early. You mentioned Jeff Lebby leaving, but so far so good, I think, for Brent Venables. What a rebound year.